Prince Harry may delay return to LA to stay for Queen's birthday this week after 2 hours of peace talks with brother William after Prince Philip's funeral, royal sources claim. Prince Harry may delay his return to Los Angeles to stay for the Queen's birthday on Wednesday, reports say. The Duke of Sussex is said to have booked an open flight to the U.S., meaning he could go back after his grandmother turns 95. It comes after it was reported he held 2 hours of peace talks with his older brother Prince William. They are said to have met with their father Prince Charles after Prince Philip's funeral on Saturday. Prince Harry's plane ticket means he could spend Wednesday with the Queen for her first birthday without her beloved husband. It would mean a delay in seeing his 23-month-old son Archie and his wife Meghan Markle, who is pregnant with their second child. A source told The Sun, if all goes well, he could stay for the Queen's birthday. The Duke of Sussex had to quarantine at Frogmore Cottage in Windsor when he flew in from the U.S. where he lives in a £11 million Montecito mansion. Travelers from America are supposed to self-isolate for 10 days but are allowed to go to funerals on compassionate grounds. Reports say Harry used the UK government's test and release scheme so he could leave isolation after 5 days following a negative COVID test. He went to Prince Philip's funeral on Saturday and was seen talking to Prince William and his wife Kate Middleton after the ceremony, raising hopes they could make up. The Duke is reported to have later had a meeting with his brother and Prince Charles for 2 hours after the encounter. It would have been the first time they have spoken in person since Harry and Meghan's bombshell Oprah Winfrey chat earlier this year. They are said to have met away from the television cameras in Windsor Castle after Saturday's coverage ended. The warring brothers are expected to meet again in the summer when they unveil a new statue to Princess Diana at Kensington Palace. Insiders hope the July 1 event, done to commemorate what would have been their mother's 60th birthday, will help heal their relationship. A source said, "It's early days but you'd hope this is exactly the first step Philip would have wished for." Prince Harry rocked his family with bombshell accusations during his and his wife's interview with Ms. Winfrey in March. The 36-year-old claimed his 38-year-old brother and 72-year-old father were trapped in the firm. All three of them were said to have talked after the interview but they were believed to have been unproductive. The Duchess of Sussex, who also leveled claims against the royal family in the chat, did not travel with Harry after doctors advised against it due to her pregnancy. Instead the 39-year-old watched the ceremony on TV and sent a handwritten note to leave with a wreath at the funeral. Harry and William were seen talking after the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral at St George's Chapel on Saturday. They were separated by the Queen and Prince Philip's eldest grandson, Peter Phillips, during the funeral procession. But in a sign of a possible reconciliation the brothers were seen speaking as they left the chapel and walked towards Windsor Castle. Harry was initially seen speaking to his sister-in-law Kate but she appeared to hang back so he could talk to William for a few moments without her. The chat came after an impromptu decision by some of the royal family to walk back to the castle. This was despite state cars having been put on for them, and it gave the cameras a chance to see them talk. Meanwhile sources told the Mail on Sunday Harry experienced a great deal of frostiness from many of his relatives since arriving in Britain. Princess Anne, Prince Edward and his wife Sophie failed to acknowledge him before or during the service, it was claimed. One source said, ironically the only one who has expressed any sympathy towards him is Prince Andrew. He knows from Sarah Ferguson, and now firsthand, how it feels to be the outsider, which Harry very much is. As far as the others are concerned, there is a deep sense of protection towards the Queen and resentment towards Harry. There is little sympathy for him after what he and Meghan said on Oprah. The Sussexes accused the royals of institutional racism during the bombshell 90-minute interview. They claimed one member of the family, not the Queen or Prince Philip, questioned what color their son Archie's skin would be. They are still very upset, the source added. They are putting on a united front for the Queen. They all think he has behaved appallingly. The siblings maintained stony expressions as they walked behind their grandfather's cortege. The Duke of Cambridge strode ahead of his brother as they entered the 15th-century chapel and inside the atmosphere remained frosty. William sat with Kate directly opposite Harry but did not appear to make eye contact, instead preferring to focus his gaze towards his grandfather's coffin. But it was reported last week William had spoken briefly with his brother on the phone, although the source said communication had been more texts than calls. Harry has spoken to his cousin Princess Eugenie, who remains a steadfast friend. He is thought to have seen Eugenie, most likely outside since she's been strict with her new baby, said the insider. According to one report, William requested that Peter Phillips stand between him and Harry during the funeral cortege. Asked about the claim, a friend of Harry said, "He's just doing what he's told and getting on with it." The last time the brothers were seen together in public was on March 9 last year when they attended a Commonwealth service at Westminster Abbey. Aides were reported to have been walking on eggshells all week as the funeral plans were tweaked, but there was relief the brothers spoke and did so publicly. The princes talked while walking out of St. George's Chapel following the service, in a sight which triggered hopes among royal fans of a reconciliation. As the royals filed out of the chapel, Prince William spoke to the Right Reverend David Connor, the Dean of Windsor, while Harry chatted with Kate behind them. William was initially ahead of his wife and brother but turned back towards them to speak to Kate while Harry exchanged pleasantries with the Dean. Harry then caught up with his brother and sister-in-law and they walked together for a while as William removed his face mask. Then, Kate stepped away to speak to the Countess of Wessex and her daughter Lady Louise, leaving the brothers alone. Harry's friend Tom Bradby, who was presenting ITV's coverage of the funeral on Saturday, said, "Funerals are a time of reconciliation and that a sight, let's be honest, that many wanted to see. Not least the family itself." The Queen wiped away tears and was forced to mourn alone away from her family as she said an emotional final goodbye to her strength and stay after 73 years. Her Majesty looked grief-stricken and bowed her head in reverence as she accompanied her beloved husband's coffin on its final journey. Their eldest son Prince Charles cried as he walked behind the casket into church followed by other devastated royals. The Duke of Edinburgh's coffin was covered in his personal standard and carried his sword, naval cap and a wreath of flowers with a handwritten note from his wife. Pallbearers placed him onto his self-designed green Land Rover Defender hearse in the castle's quadrangle packed with hundreds of armed personnel. The Queen kept her husband poignantly close during the service by carrying special mementos from their life together inside her handbag. According to a royal insider, the Queen was planning to include one of Philip's trademark white handkerchiefs, made by his Seville retailers Kent and Haste. The crisply folded squares, inserted into the breast pocket of a sharply cut suit, were an enduring feature of the Duke's classic sartorial style. In honor of their long marriage, she is also said to have carried a small photograph of the two of them together, thought to have been taken in Malta. The island was a deeply special place for both the Queen and Philip. As newlyweds they lived in Villa Gardamangia, on the outskirts of the capital Valletta, between 1949 and 1951, while the prince was stationed there as a naval officer with HMS Magpie. The Queen later said it was one of the best periods of her life as it was the only time she was able to live normally. The couple returned often, including to celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary in 2007. The grief-stricken monarch left a personal, handwritten message to Philip placed alongside a wreath of white lilies, small white roses and white freesia chosen by her. Photos show only a glimpse of the note, which appears to be written on official card from Buckingham Palace. It has not been confirmed what it said. After the 8-minute procession and the 50-minute service, Prince Philip's coffin was lowered into the royal vault. A lament was played by a lone piper of the Royal Regiment of Scotland and the last post was then sounded by buglers of Philip's beloved Royal Marines. They then also played action stations at the specific request of the Duke of Edinburgh. Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, pronounced the blessing before the 30 royal mourners silently filed out of the church into cars to take them the short journey back to Castle. Harry and William decided to walk back with Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, and were seen smiling speaking animatedly as they were reunited for the first time in a year where their relationship became fractured. The emotional Queen had arrived at the funeral as the national anthem played and the royal Bentley stopped next to her beloved husband's coffin. She poignantly paused for a moment of reflection as cannons fired and bells tolled in remembrance of the Duke, wiping tears from her eyes. Her Majesty was then driven to St. George's Chapel with her lady-in-waiting Susan Hussey, before being sat alone at the front of the church. She stood and bowed her head during the national minute's silence. She looked at the coffin throughout the poignant service, where the majority of her children and grandchildren were on the verge of tears. Following behind the coffin was the royal procession, led by Philip's children Prince Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward. The grandchildren, including William and Harry, followed, but the brothers were separated by their cousin Peter Phillips, viewed as a peacemaker between the two. The Duke of Cambridge entered the chapel one place ahead of his younger brother as mourners filed into the historic Gothic chapel without speaking. But they later chatted as they walked back to the castle, with Kate taking a step back to let them spend time alone. The Queen had decided that no royals should wear military uniform after Prince Andrew demanded to dress as an admiral and Prince Harry was stripped of his titles. But they were allowed to wear their medals. Andrew was seen driving away in a casual suit and aviator sunglasses around an hour after the funeral ended. The Queen wore Queen Mary's Richmond brooch, while Camilla wore the Rifles brooch. The Duchess of Cornwall wore the brooch in July 2020 when Philip's role as Colonel-in-Chief of the Infantry Regiment the Rifles was formally handed over to her. Kate wore a necklace and earrings borrowed from the Queen. After the funeral ended at 3:49 p.m., the Queen led the royal family from the chapel, followed by the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. She had a brief conversation with the Dean of Windsor outside the chapel before being driven away. Other members of the royal family walked away from the chapel in small groups, chatting as they walked through the sunlit grounds, including William and Harry. Many of the royals only stayed at the castle for a short period before heading home.